Hello, fellow Dandara players. I'm just here talking about the new quote unquote mode of this game, which is the cheat mode. Cheat mode gives you a couple new tools, and there's a third new tool in the menu as well, which lets you return to camp at any time, which is going to be really nice for just any run in general. But the cheat mode, more importantly, adds two things that make this game just so much faster. The first is endless specials. Endless specials just gives us all the damage we could ever want for a boss. We can basically just spam specials at any speed we want, and we can really make a lot of use of them. There's not really much downsides to not to keeping yourself from using specials. So we're going to be making use of that. These computers here, they're also a new feature. They add make the game a little more difficult. They also change the crib of creation, which is the next room here. It's a little faster on this new patch, so I guess it's a little bit of time save. And most of the rooms that have been changed positively, with exception to the heart room. That being said, the other thing that we get is we get the ability to respawn in any room we die in. So that would sound like a bad thing because we're not allowed to death warp anymore, but it actually becomes more of a positive because there's already a menu option for death warping, which saves us a lot of time. We're also going to skip arrow, if you just noticed, because as soon as I have the Johnny B missile, not really going to be using my basic attack much, if at all, anymore. There are a couple fights later on. I might talk about those, why it would be nice to have an improved arrow for that, but for the most part, I don't really need that, so I'm just going to go with Johnny B missile as soon as I get it. And we're going to be really abusing it just throughout the run. Some other things that are kind of important, that's an accidental map grab, don't pay any attention to that. That would easily be cut out. This could be optimized a little bit more, actually quite a bit more. I do pick up a couple chests that are pretty much unnecessary. I also die quite a bit, which can save quite a bit of time. I could actually see this becoming a sub 40 time, and maybe even with a little bit of routing, like even more so. But for the most part, this is just kind of a test run. It's pretty sloppy, it's pretty unoptimized, but it's just kind of putting it out there. Like this is what we can do with this new mode and what exactly we can do with it. This is a pretty good example, though, of why the 3-shot's not super great. We have to fight a couple of those guys, and they take about 3 of those shots when you have the 4-shot arrow, and versus the 3-shot. And the 3-shot you can do like 4 if you get all of them directly on him. And so it's a pretty big difference in terms of how much firepower you have for this early game. I think the tank fight even goes slower, but it doesn't matter that much at the end of the day, because as soon as we get the Johnny B missile, we'll be saving a lot more time with that than what we could have saved by getting arrow. Outside of not grabbing arrow, there's not really that many differences to how the main game, the early game goes. It's pretty much very similar because we need to wait till we get a special before we can do anything. But for the most part, it's a very straightforward early game. So here we are, we grab camp. Normally would not need to grab a camp at all, but I am going to use this for Death Warp pretty soon, right after grabbing Thomas actually. And I guess it will be the first example of a menu Death Warp you will see. And the menu Death Warp is actually faster for the early game by quite a bit, because you don't have to spend time going into rooms where things will kill you. You can use this after like the Johnny B missile, grabbing arrow, and after Thomas. All 3 of those you could have a pretty decent time save on, and you just have to make up for a little bit of salt later on in the run, which is pretty doable. Even for any percent, that's pretty doable trade-off. It's just, is that trade-off worth it? Because you might be able to skip going to a couple chests, like the chests that are right like one room to the right and above the city outskirts camp. There's actually I think 3,000 there, and the question is it worth using so many death warps and just grabbing that chest instead? And I feel like that question was going to pop up a few times in terms of exactly how to route something like this. I don't know how much routing I will do on this, because I don't particularly like this run a lot. I do think it's pretty silly. I do think it's pretty funny in its own right and entertaining, but I don't like it as much as the any percent route, because any percent is just a lot more fun to play. I also like 100% more, because 100% is you start off kind of meager, and then you get to a kind of ridiculous point on your own. This, you just basically get Johnny B missile, and then you're ridiculous from that point on, and then you get anxiety shock, and you're even more ridiculous. That's just kind of how this bizarre run goes. So yeah, here's the first return to flag warp. One thing that's worth talking about is this is basically killing yourself, but you don't leave a body behind. So I think I had like 500 salt there. I'm not basically going to be able to use that 500 salt at all because I will not leave a body. I will not pick up my body. And that's, you know, I think that's something worth mentioning, especially for like any percent if you want to keep that salt, because you could like run back to the room that we're going to travel through to leave, but then you couldn't like do a death warp on Johnny B without losing your body. So the question is, you know, what exactly you will be doing in your own run. And I think that's a little bit worth talking about on the newest patch. Newest patch overall is a little bit of a mixed bag, and I'll talk a little bit about it as well. The reason why it's a mixed bag is unless you play on Switch and you play on PC, which I think I'm the only one that does play on Switch, you don't really gain a huge brick of time. I gained something like 30 seconds from playing on the Switch because I gained the very, very nice cutscene skip now. Unfortunately, I don't gain such cutscene skip playing on... you already had the cutscene skip on PC, so it's more about what they added. And unfortunately, the heart room is completely different now. Navigating that actually takes quite a bit of time, and for the most part, it's a bit of a pain. So the fact that this route skips heart room overall, or just skips heart room, is actually kind of nice because the heart room is now way bigger than it was before. Has a lot more. It winds around a lot more, and and when I say the heart room, I mean like after you beat the boss. When you go through the room, it's pretty much the same, with the exception of one added enemy that is not really all that threatening. I do grab this health potion here, and I actually do stand behind the decision of grabbing that because it did save me a death, and like dying does lose you like 5-10 seconds every time it happens. So yeah, it's kind of a some of this run is like you kind of play on the fly, right? Because things are in such a short manner. You know, they're in a quick manner. You have to make quick choices. You mainly just want to go because you really don't have that much firepower in the early game. The faster you can go, the better. You know, I do quite a bit of fighting here when I really don't need to. I mostly was trying to preserve this 2 health I had. I think I end up getting hit here as well, which is a little awkward. So yeah, you know, we're just kind of keep going here. We get the Johnny B missile. First boss fight's gonna be a little funny with it. I think I even miss a whole bunch of the missile, and it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You know, it really just does not matter. Like, there are so many things that are gonna be just going on in this that is just absolutely silly. It's just, I don't know how to put it, but our special meter does not matter. The number of specials we use does not matter. It's just however many you want to use in any one given situation. I go a little crazy with it because, you know, it's just like, wow, I've never gotten to play like this before. And there's definitely moments where I could have just gone instead of like hit enemies. I was just like, no. we're gonna make our point very clear. We're gonna make sure they're very dead. So we'll have to see how that goes. So here we are, approaching everyone's favorite boss. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I actually think I missed the 1 round on him, getting the first cycle of the first phase, and that's a little bit silly of me because, you know, had I hit that, I probably would have saved a lot more time. But yeah, this basically is self-explanatory what's going on here. So one thing worth mentioning about Johnny B here actually is that it hits the entire screen, so I can just basically be all the way over here and just shoot him, and yeah, I think it gives you an idea of just how ridiculous this can be. It's definitely why I probably should be its own category. I do pick up this salt because I do want to actually grab some health upgrades. It'd be nice to have them, so I can actually take, you know, more than two hits in any room in the late game. So you know, it's basically preparing whatever little I need for late game, and just using as large of death warps as I can throughout this. So from here on, it's mostly going to be what standard route looks like, I'm probably not going to do too much of narration on it, but I will talk a little bit about it before I get there. And the plan is pretty simple. I'm gonna go to the city outskirts. I'm gonna camp there, grab whatever health upgrades I need, and then I'm gonna go straight into Desert Library. And then I'm not gonna pick up any camps there. I'm just gonna go straight through it. If I die, I'm gonna like respawn in the room I died in, making it like way safer than it should be in this route. And then as soon as I grab the whatever you want to call the crystal skull, the crystal skull. Indiana Jones, the crystal skull, right there. But yeah, as soon as I grab that, I'm basically just gonna dip out and immediately kill myself, and you will get to see that. And I don't even need a special to kill myself. I don't even need to be able to damage myself to do that. I'll be able to do that in menu. So yeah, for the most part, I'm just gonna let it play from here. So there we go. That section was Remembrance Desert finished. Not too much else. I kind of said it before. We're just gonna grab the skull. We're gonna leave. We're not gonna get uh, the special from there. We don't really need the ability to damage ourselves. Sure, we could do bridge skip, but I also have not routed in grabbing 9 hearts. As you see, I have 5, so I need to get another. You're gonna need another 4 to do that, and that might not be worth it. It kind of depends. There's a few chests that you could grab to get an extra like maybe 3 hearts, but you do need to route in another chest, basically enough salt to get to the point where you could maybe do bridge skip, and then you'd have to of course grab skull and then leave the way I was doing it before. That is a possible routing choice. Not too much else to say about that. I'm just going to be going to basically what the standard run does at this point. We're going to fight Bird. We're going to grab the crystal, or the purple crystal, and then we're going to just basically dip. And you may notice I'm going to take a lot of damage in these next rooms, and it's just like, in a normal run this would be terrible, but because this is cheater percent, it's just whatever. I respawn at the start of the room. The only time it becomes really bad is when I'm like pretty far in the room. I think I actually do die like near the end of this room, and I do lose a little bit of time for that, but it's just like, it's not that bad of a punishment. There's much worse that could have happened. So I should talk a little bit about Bird, mainly because Bird's AI has changed a little bit in the newest patch. Before you could just kind of like wail on him and he'd sit there until he decided to swipe at you. But now every time you hit him, if you just saw it there, he veers to the left or the right until he wants to attack, and that actually can hurt you quite a bit. It's the reason why I considered picking up arrow earlier, because 4 shots on an arrow does a lot more than just a singular Johnny B shot. I think Johnny B does something like what three arrow shots do. So being able to hit him for more damage whenever I can would be worth more than just kind of like what you're going to see, this kind of constantly moving around trying to hit him. Okay, so once again, you know, we got through. We finally got Crystal after I think I died to the boss twice. Pretty dumb. But now I'm gonna go to Breach in the Wall, and it's pretty important because I can't do bridge skip with this current setup. That I have to basically do it the normal way. And the best way to do it the normal way is just go from bridge skip backwards. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory as well. You know, even though I think I have to go through a similar number of rooms back, it's better not to go through another just screen that says you died, since that does lose a little bit of time every time you need to do that. This merry-go-round does make that a little bit of a pain. I think I even have trouble with it later, but for now, you know, this is the way it makes sense to go. Just grab this camp spot, and then just get out. So at this point, we're about to grab Anxiety Shock and Dream World. It's really important that we get Anxiety Shock. Johnny B Missile is pretty good when you can spam it all the time, but Anxiety Shock is absolutely bonkers when you could just use it as much as you want. You basically turn the entire screen and just hit boxes that will hit enemies, and it's pretty funny, and it's also kind of ridiculous. So we're gonna basically just grab that, and then we're gonna fight the mini boss. We'll leave, and we'll head towards the final area of the game. So one thing you might notice is the fact that we only have 5 hearts right now, and that does make this a little dangerous because every death does cost a little bit of time. Even though I like to talk about how it's not really all that much of a punishment, it's still a time loss, and dying a lot is a problem. So I try to do things to make sure that I can start rooms at full HP, and I try to do what I can, but there's going to be moments where I die a lot in this, and this is part of the reality of going through Fake Town with only like 5 hearts. So here we are getting to Golden Fortress. There's quite a few things that I talk about on Golden Fortress. The first specifically is obviously these chests over here. These chests are pretty nice in terms of the amount of just health you're going to get from opening them. I think they give you something like 3k altogether. Combined with the little bit of salt I have from before, yeah, I have quite a bit of salt now. I'm just going to be spending that on HP. There's nothing else to take it for an upgrade. Everything is basically just going to get blue balled throughout this. I think I even bother like using it on the guys on treadmills because why not? I just can use it wherever I want. And there's really another thing that's worth mentioning is we're about to get to the turrets, and usually in a run you bother killing those because you're going to die in Golden Fortress, and not having a closer camp is worth it for a time save. But for us, that is completely useless. There's no reason for us to be doing that. So we're going to be basically getting through Golden Fortress, and as soon as we get to the main entrance, we're just going to be just blazing through. We don't care about that. So that's kind of the first example of using anxiety shock and just kind of like non-boss enemies. And it's pretty clear just how much it can do. I don't really think we get that liberal of use of it in any percent or 100%. Even though 100% gets a lot of salt and is able to have a lot of energy to spam those, you generally don't use them that crazy amount. At least not in my runs. I'm sure some other people just go crazy with them, but I really don't. I generally pretty frugal with it. Just not as used to using them all the time. And here, it's just standard fortress. So the big thing though is that if I die, I can just immediately respawn in the room I died in. So that saves a massive amount of time because getting through the first the right lock and the left lock's not so bad, but getting through the third lock without having to go back to camp or anything like that actually saves quite a bit of time. I think I even die here and I end up, it doesn't really lose me all that much time. In a normal run, that would be terrible. That'd be awful. But in this run, it doesn't matter. It's just whatever. We're going back to the start of the room. Sure, some time lost, but nothing even close to particularly terrible. So you can play like rooms reckless because of it, but you shouldn't play too reckless because you do lose a little bit of time every time you die. All right, this next room is really, really important because I do a glitch here that I didn't even know existed, and there it happened. I just went through that laser without taking damage, and I didn't take damage on the ball, so I'm very confused how I didn't take damage there. That's definitely worth mentioning because I've never seen that before. Well, simply put, I'd like to make sure that we get that documented because I don't know if that ever would actually be useful in the future. There are some places where that might help, but there's also a lot of places where that's just not relevant because lasers only do like 1 damage, so that's worth mentioning. But we might be able to get through, say, other hitboxes like saw blades that do 4. So the right side lock, it's normally, there's a lot of combat to do here, and because we have blue balls, we're just able to basically spam them all the time. These big enemies with weights, they actually do quite a bit of damage, and being able to just put 1 ball on them, 1 ball hitting plus a tick always kills them. It makes this like way easier by like a lot, and just being able to basically mow enemies down with impunity is kind of silly. And there's not too much else to say about this section. It's, like I said, it's a combat section mostly. You just need to kill a lot of enemies because they just get in your way. And we're going to be making sure that we do kill those enemies. So the third section, or the third lock as I like to say, of Golden Fortress, really difficult. Almost every room is really good at hitting you or even just killing you straight out. There's a lot of combat you want to avoid because there's a lot of really high health enemies. And at the end of the day, we're going to be taking quite a bit of damage. But because we can respawn at any time, it's just not that much of a problem. Okay, so once again, worth mentioning is when this next room goes wrong, you already know it goes really wrong. And I'm not too sure about it because I don't have a 4-shot, I only have a 3-shot. And I do manage to get through here, just barely. But it is kind of important to mention that because, I'm not exactly sure how that room is supposed to go on this basically like new route. Basically, quick death there to get myself back to full, because this next room is pretty much just hell on earth. So this next room, another really dangerous room. I actually go the kind of combat route on this. I just throw blue balls everywhere. It's pretty important to note that when you do put a blue ball down, because of the new AI on these birds, they can kind of put themselves in another one, which is pretty nice for combat-wise. But there's also ways to get through this room without combat at all. And I might have to look into that, because this room is just, ugh, I hate this room. It's really tense, just because all the rooms before it were so hard. Admittedly, it's not nearly as tense when you can just start at the very start of the room, but for the most part, this room has always been tense for me. You may have noticed I skipped that lock there. I simply don't need to open it. You know, like if any of these locks are not in my way for going faster, I will simply not bother with it. I do try to get through this room on one heart. I have done that before. I end up not getting it. And for the most part, there's not really a whole lot going on right before the final boss, but I do want to talk a little bit about the final boss, because the final boss just gets melted. It just gets completely melted. The first phase does have a little bit of a chance. He doesn't seem to take as much damage. Because he's a little faster at actually attacking you. Whereas the actual final boss just gets completely destroyed. And we'll see that soon enough. So here we are, phase one, just putting balls on him, let him take all the damage over time. I do need to put more on him. That's not quite enough. I still don't know if that's quite enough. I don't think it might. I think it might not be. I end up taking a lot of hits here, and while that seems really bad, because, you know, I don't really have any good potions, it'll end up just not mattering at the end of the day. Just because we're gonna show up to the final boss, and it's gonna be over before he really does anything. And you could just watch it here. It's gonna say it itself. It's just a whole bunch of balls right on top of him. It's absolutely bonkers. You know, like, just watch his health here. It's just going. It's going, 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 gone. It gets to a point where you can't even spawn mask. There's too many balls right on top of where the masks spawn, and yeah, it's over. It's already over. I don't think I've ever seen a final boss fight even close to that fast. It's absolutely silly. So some final thoughts going forward. I really would like to see this turn into its own category. First reason being that some people might want to play this category, but the main reason being that the playstyle of this is just so different from the any percent. It is basically a completely different way to play the game. It doesn't really have the same caveats. You know, it doesn't have the same risk versus reward. It doesn't have the super risky route taken here. It doesn't matter how risky the route is because you can just die, and that small time lost from dying doesn't really amount to anything. As you see, it says cheat here. We did cheat. I have no problem. And yeah, exploration is actually super short on this because we don't grab Skull Laser. We miss a whole bunch of rooms on purpose just to get our just to get our basically minimal requirement for what we need to do done. And yeah, there's not too much else to say about it. You could possibly skip another couple chests, and that might not be worth it. That might not be worth it. I don't really know. But for the most part, this is basically the run I'm thinking about, and this is. I kind of hope that we put a ruling on this because this is just absolutely silly. I really hope that the community reacts soon enough before someone actually submits a run with cheat mode on, because we don't have rules against that at the time being, and we really do need to make rules for and against that.